Hello and welcome back to the channel where in this episode we're going to be covering this weekend's hurling games. We've got matches, we've got All-Ireland Series qualifying games, we've got McDonagh Cup, Christy Ring Cup, Nicu Record Cup and Lory Meagher Cup. So I'm joined again by Conor McKenna, who's going to talk us through and make sense of what we're going to see this weekend and who he expects to come through the games. So thanks to Conor obviously for joining us, and we'll start off then with the All Ireland Hurling Championship Round 1, which is the teams who have already been knocked out of their provincial championships, the Leinster and Munster championships. So the first game is Saturday lunchtime, and it's Laois and Clare. Clare, I imagine, will be expected to come through that against Laois. But what's your thoughts, Conor?
Yeah, well, just Gerry, to start with this, I suppose it's good that we're getting to the knockout stages of the hurling. It means every game, maybe bar the two provincial finals, is now do or die. And even in the provincial finals, both sides will want to win a provincial title. So there'll be we mightn't see as much shadow boxing as we might have done in other rounds. But I think Clare, they're probably not as bad as people think either. Like, we're kind of getting written off a lot of quarters. They actually played quite well against Limerick. Like, Limerick are a very, very good team, and it was only really towards the end where Limerick started to pull away. Like, so I think Clare are not as bad as people think. Brian Lohan is a very good coach. He won't take any rubbish, and he set up with a team with a chance of winning a game. And I just think Clare, a few injury lads, doubts the last, a few lads missing, but if they can get any of those lads back, they might have a bit of a chance too. So I think that they should account for Laois. I think Laois are probably a bit out of their depth in senior level. I think they do deserve to be there. They've actually done very, very well in recent years, but missing a few lads this year didn't really help with injuries. Now they have a few lads back now for the moment, but I don't think Laois are as strong as they were last year. And I'd be surprised if they caused a scalp. I don't think this is the draw that Laois might have wanted either, to be honest with you. I think they might have preferred to have played Cork, maybe, to be honest, Gerry, or maybe played. I think they couldn't play Western, but I think they would have. I just don't. I think Clare might have a small bit too much. I'm just going to go with Clare for this. I think that Clare. I think they probably they could take positives out of the Limerick game, and this is their chance to get their season back on track. So I think Clare should win that game fairly comfortably this weekend.
Okay, as we say, I think we both are in agreement that Clare should be too strong, but obviously Laois surprised a few last year in these sort of qualifying rounds after being knocked out. But the other game, the other qualifier, it's another game where certainly in terms of matches that are on Saturday, it's very, very much my highlight. I think I would have swung one way definitely and said I think it's going to be won comfortably by Cork. But after watching Dublin in the last sort of 10-15 minutes against Kilkenny, and Cork, they just sort of seemed to struggle through the game against Waterford. To me, it's a lot more 50-50 now. So how do you see that one?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Gerry. Just before we start, one thing, I actually think that this format, it was kind of they had pre-2018. Like, I actually, this is actually a better format than the round robin, to be honest. I think this means more matches are meaningful, to be honest. I think that if you lose in the Leinster Championship, you're out of the Leinster Championship. If you lose when the qualifiers, you're out of the Championship completely. Like, so I think this format, there's nothing wrong with it. But I just think that I'm going to go with Dublin this weekend. I think Dublin are a better team than Cork, to be honest. I think that Cork are getting far too much credit. I think that they were very poor in 2016. They were that year, and I just think that they haven't done enough. They had 2 good years in 17 and 18, and I just don't think that they're as good as people are making out. They were poor enough in the league every game. They're poor enough in the Championship. They were very, very flat against Waterford. Dublin are a similar team to Waterford. They pride themselves on work rate and being tactically astute, and maybe their ability to punch above their weight, and maybe they see themselves. They're a bit like Waterford. Waterford have often had the underdogs tag, and Dublin are a bit like that in hurling as well. And Dublin are a lot stronger than people give them credit for. There's a base of good hurlers in Dublin, and they have a good, solid nucleus of a team at the moment to have Dublin. And I just think Cork, they're probably weak in defence. The forwards aren't maybe as strong. They're very reliant on Patrick Horgan, and Shane Kignan's a good player too. So Cork have good players, fair enough. The raw materials are there. You could potentially make a good hurling team, but they haven't been going well all year. And I don't know, Kilkenny fairly blew them away in the All-Ireland quarter-final last year. I think Dublin might do similar. I'm going to go for a Dublin win this weekend. Might be slightly controversial, but I think Dublin are going better than Cork. And I see absolutely no reason why they shouldn't win this game.
It was certainly a win for Dublin here, and a win against a big sort of traditional county in Cork would be big for Dublin hurling. Obviously, it's something that there's been a lot of investment and a lot of push towards over the last few years. So it will obviously be interesting, if they can get a wee run. Obviously, then just the way this format works. So these two teams, the two winners of this, then play again next weekend against. I'm just going to run through it. Wexford come in, and sorry, who?
Tipperary.
Tip, is it? Tipperary, yeah, Wexford and Tip. Because then it's basically the five. They're the six teams who didn't reach the provincial final. So still all to play for, as you say. It's good that we're finally at the stage in the hurling where the games are do or die. It's to me, as you said about the round robin, and obviously in the football you've got the Super 8. It's like whenever I watch sport, I want to watch sport where it's not like, sure, we'll come back next week and with another chance. It's at its best whenever it's do or die, and Dublin and Cork, two counties that'll they'll take losing bad. So whichever one comes out of that, is they're going to have to answer a few questions after it. So it'll be certainly an interesting match to watch.
But and Gerry, just going back on that, just Cork. I don't know where they're getting a massive expectation about, to be honest. Because before 2017, it was very, very negative in Cork, about the future. I heard how it was going, and then they kind of bet Tip, who were All-Ireland champions in 2017 after a cracking game in Munster, and they won that Munster, and they won the Munster the next year. And since then, the whole narrative kind of changed. Cork to suddenly have all these young players coming through, but we were just talking off air about clubs there and clubs how to run, and Dublin hurling is the perfect example of what can happen if the raw materials are in place, because I think the dual club model in Dublin has worked so well, and I suppose there's been a bit of investment there. The facilities are very good, but there's been good coaching in clubs, and you have so many powerhouses like Ballyboden and Coola and Kilmacook Crokes and these clubs who are producing quality hurlers, and Fina, another one, St. Vincent's, like these clubs, to name a few, who are producing good hurlers every year. And it's kind of meant that Dublin have a nucleus of good hurlers at the moment. There's a bit of depth to Dublin at the moment. I think Dublin are a lot better than people think. They're probably haven't maybe got those 2 or 3 star hurlers that will maybe win them in All-Ireland, but they certainly have a nice bunch of players. And I think Dublin are a good example of how a county should be running hurling, to be honest with you. I suppose it's easy enough to maybe have those players coming through when you have a big population and a bit of investment behind it. But I just think that Cork, I would have been a big fan of this Cork team, but they haven't really delivered in enough occasions. I think that against Dublin, they need to be like what Kilkenny were last week. They need to have Dublin. I think if they're 16 points up, they should win. They don't think Dublin really would have taken a lot of spirit from that. But if Dublin goes 16 points down again, they're not going to win. I think if Dublin, though, like what I said with Waterford, if Dublin get on top of Cork, big, strong Dublin team, Dublin are physicality, it'll be interesting to see who they'll put on Patrick Horgan, like Dublin. But I think that if they get on top of Cork, get in control of the game, then they'll win the match. I think if it goes into a dogfight, Dublin will win. I think the only way I see Cork winning this game is if they can outscore Dublin in the early stages. If Cork can build up a lead, they'll probably win the game. But otherwise, I think I see Dublin winning.
Okay, so we'll move to the Joe McDonagh Cup. This weekend, there's actually only one match. It's Saturday, 2:00, and it's Cardinal against Meagher. I think Cardinal should probably win this one pretty handily. I know, obviously, the draw with Antrim last week probably should have beat Antrim. Meath have already lost to Kerry. So, on paper, it certainly looks like Carlo will be strong favourites to win this one. Am I right, or do you see Meath putting up a big challenge?
I think Meath will give it a good account of that, Gerry. I think Meath won't roll over, but I think definitely Carlo should win the game. And I just think Carlo, actually, the draw, they were on a horrible losing run. The lockdown actually came at the right time because they weren't going well at all. They've now in a position where they drew the match against Antrim, they should have won. So their winless run continues, but there's now a clear path for Carlo to get to a Joe McDonagh Cup final. Like, they won the Joe McDonagh in 2018, playing some very good hurling. But this is what I would say. They have to beat Meath this weekend, and they have to beat Westmeath away in the last round to have any chance of getting there. Now, Westmeath should be over with nothing to play for that stage. So you'd imagine they will win that game, and you'd imagine they will win this. If they then they'll have 5 points. So depending on other results, that might be enough. It might not be enough, but it'll leave their game against Kerry. But they'll probably these 2 games, this and the Westmeath match are essential, and then the Kerry game could easily be a playoff. Then depending on how other results turn out, if Antrim beat Kerry or however that works. So Carlo, but I put it this way, Gerry, if Carlo don't win the match this week, they're probably out of the championship. It'd be very hard for them to see them doing well. So I think Meath can also get to a final. They have to win their 3 matches, and Nick Weir is from Westmeath, actually is managing Meath, but they'll see this. If they can win this game, Meath, they actually gave Carlow a right shock in 2018. They gave them a right good game and could have won that game in the Joe McDonagh in Carlow. So Meath will go into this with nothing to fear. And if Meath can win this game, then suddenly they have a home game against a Westmeath team who are not firing all cylinders, and then they have a home game against an Antrim team who could already be qualified for the final for all they know. So suddenly if Meath win this, then Meath have a fighter chance of getting to a Joe McDonagh final. So I'd say Meath will really be targeted in this game, and it'll be a better game than people think. I'd say Carlow, Joe, this should be a box tick win for Carlow. Even if it's a 1-point win, build momentum, get over that winless streak, and then put yourself in with a good chance of getting to a final. But I think Carlow should just have enough.
Okay, so moving on to the Christy Ring Cup. This week it's round 2B, where some of the teams, it's kind of a bit of like a backdoor route where some of the teams are that have already lost or lost on paper are playing again. So we have Saturday at 1:30 we have Derry versus Offaly. Obviously now these teams, neither of them played in the opening round of the Christy Ring Cup. Offaly didn't play last weekend, but they had got the bye against Sligo, which set up a match against Down, which they lost. And now this week they go up against Offaly, who I know will be many people's favourites to win the competition. So it'll be interesting to get a look at Offaly and see, if their quality shows through at this level. So how do you see that one working out?
Well, I think, Gerry, that Offaly should win a Christy Ring, but I think now they have Michael Fennelly in as manager, and Fennelly is a great lad. I think that Kilkenny team was known for their dedication and their ability to win every game, and so they definitely will not be taking any team granted. That's one thing for sure. They're in no position to take a team for granted. I think Offaly at the moment in Hurling, they're in a position where, while they're on the pitch, they're at an all-time low, Gerry. This is the worst they've probably ever been in terms of the level they're at in Christy Ring. They actually they're doing an awful lot of things off the pitch at the moment, very, very well off. They have better underage teams than they would have had before. The schools run well. There's a few clubs ran quite nicely in Offaly. So they're actually in a position where they're probably in a potential where they've hit the rock bottom and the only way is up, for Offaly at the moment. So they played Derry in 2000. They in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Derry absolutely nearly caused a shock that day. It would have been an absolute massive shock at the time. But at that time, Offaly were probably beginning a downward spiral. And then suddenly they went into Bet Cork in the semi-final then. But Offaly back then, people might have thought they were going down. Well, now they're playing Derry, and they probably 20 years later, they've probably gone down all that way. They're downward spiral. It's probably at a stage now where the curve might start to point upwards for Offaly, that kind of way. And I just think Derry, I think they only had 3 slot needed players playing against Down. And when a team is that strong, you need a small bit more than 3 lads playing. Now, a lot of them have gone to the football. I don't know, will they spring a rabbit from the hat with playing Christy McKaig and Brendan Rodgers these fellas the weekend? Personally, I'd be on the fence whether I support it or not. I wouldn't probably support it in the sense that they mightn't win the game anyway, and it might look bad for the other players who are training all year. But it could be, if they have a full team, Derry, if every fit hurler, the best hurlers in Derry were playing Derry this weekend, I think they'd be very, very close to beating Offaly. And I think Derry are the type of team where this weekend will come too soon for them. But in future years, they're definitely good enough to be a Joe McDonagh Cup team and a Division 2A team. They lost a 2B final this year against Down, lost to Down last week. I think Offaly should do enough, and I think Offaly should win the competition. But I think Derry will give it. I think Offaly will this weekend will come to soon as head, but I think Derry long term Derry aren't in a bad place.
Okay, and the other game at this level is Roscommon and Sligo. Sligo were the team who Derry were supposed to play in the first round of games, and COVID again cost them the trip, and Roscommon were defeated by Wicklow. So both teams were put out from the first round. So they meet again here in the last chance saloon, so to speak. Have you any thoughts on that one? Obviously, a Connacht derby. So how do you see that one working out?
Well, it's a bit of a pity the way the Sligo story has worked, Gerry, because they won a Lory Meagher in 2018, I think, and then they won the Nicu Record Cup last year. So they're after going up 2 divisions. So it just shows you that the tier system was kind of working for a team like Sligo. But then there was a row with the management team, I believe, and the management quit in the interim period between March and between now. So that's a big backward step for them. We have no real form to go. I think the bet Leitrim was at Division 3A finals, so they're after going to 2B, and they're probably at that level. And I think Sligo now, Roscommon are probably a bit more solid, consistent Christy Ring side in recent years, and they might just be a bit more settled at the moment and might just go for Roscommon to win that game.
Okay, and so moving to the Nicky Record Cup, obviously, as we've said before, it's always difficult to get much information about these games, but we have a few games this weekend. So Saturday, they're actually both 1:30 on Saturday. So we have got Longford and Leitrim in one game. So just have a look and see. Leitrim were beat by Armagh in the first round of games, and Longford were beat by Donegal. So what way do you see that one working out? Based on the results there, you would maybe think that Longford ran Donegal close, and Donegal had a good win against Armagh. So would you think Longford would be favourites for that one?
Well, to be honest with you, Gerry, I'd be lying every time I've ever seen any of those teams play, but on form guide, you'd have to go with Longford, to be honest with you, Gerry. But I don't want to be kind of pretending I'm an expert on these teams. I could comment and say I watch it, but I don't want to be misinformed people. But I'd say Longford probably on form. But in the Nicu Record, it's one of those competitions where even if there is a shock, it doesn't really go reported, to be honest. That kind of way, so. But I'd say Longford might just be too strong. And then the other game is Monaghan and Tyrone. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't have seen either of those either. But I'd say Nicky Record, it'd probably be, it's hard to call. I'd say maybe Armagh would probably be the favourites to win the competition, but Monaghan and Tyrone had a disappointing result against Mayo in the last round. But Tyrone are doing a bit of work in hurling, putting in a bit of an effort underage, and Monaghan Castleblaney were in the All-Ireland Junior final a few years ago. So I don't know how. It's hard to call that game as well, really, to be honest. But I don't think either of those teams are real contenders for the competition, to be honest with you. But I'd say Monaghan might just be a bit strong for them. Okay.
Just again, the form on that one, just Monaghan and Tyrone, they actually both played Mayo. So Mayo beat Monaghan by 25, and they beat Tyrone by 17. So it looks as though they're, as you say, neither team's probably going to be there whenever the trophy's lifted at the end of the competition. So it brings us on just their final game. Then we'll just touch on it very quickly, just because we don't want to be disrespectful to any of the competitions, but we have a more or less essentially a semi-final in the Lory Meagher Cup, where Fermanagh have got a win and a draw from their first two games, which puts them into the final. So they beat Laois and they drew with Cavan, who meet this weekend. So again, the form guide would maybe suggest that Cavan might be expected to win that one, but obviously, as it happens, it could go either way. So have you any experience of either of those two?
Not really either, Gerry, to be honest. But I'd probably go with Cavan to win if I was pushed, because they probably seem to be a bit more consistent over recent times. Loud were going strong at one stage, actually, and they were maybe getting to Nicky Records, but they've gone back an awful lot in the hurling. But I suppose there's just not really an appetite for the game in the town, to be honest, or in the county, Gerry, to be honest. But I just think for these counties, probably the biggest goal long term for these counties now has to, not for Longford, Cavan, now specifically, but any of those smaller hurling counties, I suppose it's to establish a cohort of players that are strong, and then I suppose trying to maybe get the club to seem stronger. And I suppose the most important thing, as we kind of were saying there with the football, is to be up at the highest division as possible. So if a player is a dual player coming through, like the hurling, and he's a good dual player, maybe have some chance of attracting him to play hurling, that kind of way. Like if you look at Monaghan and Tyrone there, for example, realistically, if you're a good dual player, are you going to choose to play for the Monaghan hurlers over the footballers or Tyrone hurlers? You're probably not, to be honest. That kind of way, and Cavan is probably the same. But I suppose that's the key for counties, is to keep maybe a core of players together every year. That's why I mightn't be a big fan of Derry. And Derry are probably the one county where they have potential to be a very strong hurling county. Well, maybe not very strong, potential to be a Joe McDonagh Cup team. And then if you're looking at it, then if you could win a Joe McDonagh Cup and get to Liam McCarthy, if there was a good young player coming through, or if Derry mightn't be maybe not as strong in Ulster, then you might be making a decision for a player, leaving him with a decision to make. And Down could be the same, and Kildare could maybe be the same as those. And I think that's maybe why counties like Offaly have an advantage, because even then they'd probably still attract a player to the hurling team in the football, because the footballers wouldn't be particularly strong either at the moment. Westmeath nearly could be the same. Like, like it's not really like those counties have a chance of attracting players like Laois the same, but it's the counties where football is the bee's knees, is the main game. They might have if they're hurling teams like Kerry is another example where like some of those Kerry footballers could be very good hurlers, but they're probably not going to choose to play because Dublin is actually finding that problem, Gerry, as well. Like where it's hard. Like if you look at the likes of Conor O'Callaghan, Jim McConnelly, and Cormac Costello and these fellas, Kieran Kenny, they could be star hurlers. And when we say star hurlers, they could be. I say Conor O'Callaghan will probably be the greatest player never to win an All-Ireland medal if he's won 2 All-Irelands with Coola as a hurler. Like, so there's so many of those brilliant and likewise, I suppose, for the footballer counties, like there's some weaker football counties where like Tipperary probably example that in Limerick where there could be brilliant footballers in the county who will only ever play hurling. I think today the dual player is nearly gone, to be honest, and I think it's a pity, but I think, Gerry, that county managers are often to blame for that in some way because no county seems to encourage dual players. What do you think on that? Would you tend to agree with me?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, you're talking about the dual player, and obviously, up in Ulster, there's Slaughtneil, or certainly, the most famous of the dual. And I know that whenever they were sort of getting to the Ulster finals, won all the Ulster titles, there was a lot of talk about the 2 managers of the hurling team and the football team, and like the relationship that they had. And how they work together, which as you say, like it doesn't seem to happen. Certainly outside clubs, and you used to see like certainly like counties maybe like Galway or Cork. You would have seen this guy's playing for this, and they're going both ways. But I think it even brings me on to as well. One of the wee questions I wanted to ask you just before we went was I seen them talking about obviously there's the big debate between county and club and the calendars, and I see they're looking now at moving the calendar, and possibly you could have All Ireland finals. I think it was August or July or August or something they were talking about. What do you make of that?
Well, I think they were going to scrap the pre-season competition, and that's probably a good thing because like I think just going back and that like managers are going now, we want to win every match, we have to do all this training, and then if you go and say to your manager then like, oh well, I can only go to 1 every 2 sessions, I'm going with the hurlers, they say actually no, we don't want you have to make a decision or whatever. And I think that's a big problem. I just don't know why. I always wonder why a common sense approach is not used. I suppose that like they're trying to say no, we can't look after the hurlers, and there's times then when hurling managers might be obliging, like, and they might have a player maybe willing to train once a week, or like, but it just doesn't seem to be. To be honest, Gerry, every year I just think that if there's 10 dual players now, next year there seems to be 9, and the year after there seems to be 8, and then like there might have been 10 dual players 10 years ago maybe, but now there doesn't seem to be any. Or maybe there's probably a few we don't probably see, to be honest. That kind of way, maybe in counties like Keith Higgins seems to do a bit, but in Mayo, but I don't know, is he playing this year, for example? Like I just don't know. Is there? I just don't think that it's encouraged enough, to be honest. I think it could be done a lot more. But the split season, I think one thing I would say, I think the inter-county gets too much of a bashing. There's an awful lot of casual GAA followers who live for the inter-county and who wouldn't be involved in clubs. So I don't think that the GAA, like people seem to think the inter-county is just some big money spinner and that's all the value it has. Like the inter-county attracts big crowds, and I think people probably place a bit too much emphasis on the club, Gerry. I think the club is kind of seen as being this special story. And then when this club finals on, you wouldn't get 2,500, 3,000 people at them, that kind of way. Like, and I just think that that's not necessarily an issue. I think that the clubs seem to be the club. The county is a combination of all the clubs, fair enough. But people seem to think the club is all that matters, and that should be. And the county is kind of a stick to bash with its own, like that kind of way. Like, there's never the positive spoken into account, like the viewing it gets, the interest it gets, how much coverage it generates. Like, I don't know what your take is, but I don't know why people hate the inter-county so much, to be honest. Maybe it's because if we had more of a tiered competition, maybe that's an issue, that maybe there's too many teams that people think aren't interested. Like, they kind of go on about the club being great, and then every club championship in Ireland is tiered, basically, bar counties where there's only 2 or 3 clubs. But what would you think? Would you be half inclined to agree with me?
To be honest, like, I can kind of see it. Like, I'm not actually a member of any club. So to me, like, there's local clubs about the place, where, like, I like to see them doing well. Once it comes out of the county championships and the provincial championships, which is something, that personally I definitely feel like I sadly miss it this year. You know, where like I love to see how the interim teams get on when they go out of interim. But I can also see the point of like there's something to be said from like for me personally, it'd be more sort of like from a soccer background, but like winning stuff with your mates. You know, like the guys who you're playing with alongside at the inter-county, like I can see why. Like to me, that is sacred. You know, like if you're playing alongside your neighbours, boys you grew up with. For me, like it was never really the playing, but like more like involved in coaching stuff. You know, and that was more like it was special. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're standing there and boys that you've known for years and you're winning alongside them. Whereas I think sometimes whenever you go to the county, like there's always going to be a certain sense of rivalry, you know, with some people between them, and you know, like Johnny's on the team there, but you know, there's a boy at our club who could do a better job than him, you know, as such. So I can see it from that point. I think the problem is it's getting the balance. And I do feel that sometimes the club championships have been disrespected a wee bit. Where it's not. It's more so to me. It's like what I was saying to you the other day about like watching games, and like I want to see a game 70 minutes, or obviously at club level, you know, 60, and I want to see the games where they're going at it for the full time, not like a lot of the games there at the weekend, where you had a strong wind, the weather was having an impact. And you know, so many times whenever you're watching like provincial finals and all, and it's like you're sitting watching it, and it turns into that kind of game where it's like, right, you get your 30 minutes to try and score as many as you can, and we'll get our 30 minutes to try and score. So I can see the point. But I do think from what you're saying about attendances, I know one of the things that's always a problem with summer sports and attendances is people tend to want to go on their holidays around them times. So like there's going to be times where like people will be like big like All Ireland semi-finals, finals. People will be wanting to be on their holidays at that time, and you can imagine the arguments with the other half. You know, it's like, well, I was going to book a fortnight in Spain. I'd be like, no, but Dublin, you know, could be playing in the final that day. You know, and it's certainly something, you know, that I'm sure they'll talk about it, and that in 2 years' time they'll come up with another idea, and you know, it just feels like there might be too much to squeeze into a limited amount of time that we get, and the climate we get in Ireland.
And like I'm actually probably being a bit hypocrite. I'm someone who probably does book holidays around actually going to different counties to club matches as well to an extent. Like, so I actually would be a big enough club person. I just don't. I actually like club an awful lot. I think the club game is quite good, but I just don't think the inter-county should be bad. I think the inter-county is probably a bit better, to be honest, Right? I find the inter-county very interesting and everything. I just think that there's definitely an awful lot of people who love the inter-county. I just don't know why. I don't know why people are so quick to dismiss it all the time. I just don't think it's. I think if you look at the GAA from just a purely non-financial point of view, a purely sacred or people interested, the interest is still. I'd say the inter-county is still the most prized asset, to be honest. Do you know? I just think it's. I suppose then it's probably the thing. 2% of only players, 98% of players are only club players, they're not inter-county players, and even those 2% still play for the club. So the argument's for and against, but I think the inter-county should definitely be enjoyed while we have it. Definitely.
I think even, you know, just you're saying that the county getting the bashing and stuff. I think again it does come down probably to economics and money, and not necessarily the fact of that they're bringing in the big matches. It's more the boys that are criticising them, you know, that are on the TV and that are in the newspapers. They're not going to sell as many newspapers or as many you know, as many viewers on a clip or something, you know, if they're bashing some club. You know, that you may, if you're going to do it, you may as well, you know, get the proper headlines and go for the big county, you know, and stick the feet in there to offend as many as possible, you know. So it seems to be the way of it. But I suppose no doubt they'll come up with something. But for now, I think I've stolen enough of your time. So I'll let you go. I know you'll probably find something to keep you busy. But again, my thanks to Conor for, you know, it's great insight. He knows a hell of a lot more than I do. So it's always good to ask the questions and have somebody that's more than capable of giving you good answers. So thanks again, and we will be back probably sometime around Monday. dependent, work dependent, schedule dependent. But hopefully, we'll have whenever you have all stopped watching the US election coverage. Hopefully, there'll be some football and hurling to keep you busy. You know, so thanks again, and thanks for watching, and again, thanks to Conor for his time.